I never really did like thunderstorms. The lightning would make my stomach drop as I waited for the boom of thunder to rattle my eardrums. The rain was fine, though. When it was just rain, it was peaceful and lulled me to sleep. But when I see that first flash of lightning, it's all downhill from there. But it always wasn't like that, though. About a month or so ago, the rainy season began to kick in, and we took all of our indoor plants outside to get a good dose of water before we brought them back in. I would sit in a chair during the rainy days and watch the rain fall into the plants until they could take no more water. The water would spill over the brim. Eventually, the plants would take all the water and would leak out the bottom. I was always in a hypnotized state when it rained. I would stare out the window so long that I would space out, and just the sound of the rain would take me away from reality. Oh, and then night fell. You see, when a thunderstorm occurred, it didn't really develop until the nighttime, or when gray clouds would form at night. It was like the weather knew it was time to start a light show, and would come out to play. And the drumming of the thunder wanted to play as well. And no matter how hard I tried to cover my ears, the noise would just get louder and louder as the thunder rolled. Now, back then, thunderstorms didn't really bother me that much. The thunder was annoying, and the lightning that flashed made me jump, but it wasn't so frightening. Well, until he showed up. One night, after a couple of days of just rain, I had been home from school due to the flooding in the college. The cars couldn't get into the parking lot because of the flood, so they canceled the classes until the rain stopped and the city maintenance would get there and get all the drains cleaned. That gave me a chance to catch up on my homework and my projects. Get ahead of the game, said my professors. They'd say it all the time. I sat down at the dining table to get some work done. By that time, I got the majority of my stuff done, mainly math, because I hated that subject. Night had taken over, and the thunder made the water in my glass ripple slightly. Intense thunder. I hadn't realized the time had gone by so quickly. I hadn't seen my father come home from work, nor my mother downstairs to make dinner. I must have been so into my work that it had gone by. Another flash of lightning struck and made me jump. I turned in my seat and looked at the window, my usual place when I sit and gaze at the drowning potted plants. My curiosity stirred on what the backyard must look like when lightning flashed on the trees and the grass. I rose from the dining table and moved to my normal chair by the window. The only light on was the dining room light, the dim light illuminating my chair. I sat down and peered out the window, waiting for the next flash of lightning to show itself. And once the lightning struck, I couldn't believe what I saw. It was a man, I think, or rather a dark figure. I couldn't make out what he or what it was. All I saw was a dark silhouette of a person in the fraction of a second that the lightning struck. I rubbed my eyes. I must be seeing things, I said to myself. I turned and headed for the kitchen and grabbed a flashlight in the drawer. The lightning flashed, but I couldn't see it. When I got back, I shined the light outside so I could look at that figure, but nothing was there. I chuckled and shut off the light. I sat down and looked out the window again for the next flash. But there it was again. It was closer. My stomach sank this time. I got a glimpse of some of its features. It had no clothes, beady little eyes that glowed when the lightning flashed, pale, almost green like skin. All that detail in the fragment of a second. I stood from my chair, shaking my head. All that time that I was focused on my homework made my eyes play tricks on me, I thought to myself. I chuckled again and looked out the window mid-flash for the next strike. My breath was hitched in my throat. It was there again, and it was closer. Almost at the patio. In a panicked state, I stepped back from the window and ran to my bedroom. I locked the door and huddled in my bed. I shifted and turned my lamp on. I stared at my door, my window. About an hour or so passed and the storm was fading. Nothing had happened since I was looking out the window. I had to have been seeing things. I was just scaring myself, right? Yeah, that had to have been it. I sighed and turned off my light, drifting off to sleep a few minutes later. I slept through that night. Over the course of 5 days, there hadn't been a storm. Everything had been normal. Mom made lunch as always. My younger sister would come home from school and she would eat lunch with me. My dad would come home from work at about 5 o'clock p.m. and everything was fine. Everything was normal. And then the next storm hit a week later. In the back of my mind, I thought, it's just another storm. It's just a rainy season, nothing more. It's normal. But there was that gnawing feeling in the back of my mind that wanted to look out that window and see the flashing lights, to see if it was still there. When I finally got the courage to look outside, I waited for it, that lightning. The beginning thunder was faint, which indicated that the storm was far away. And when the lightning struck, there he was. I bit my lip. I didn't believe it. I went into the kitchen and grabbed the flashlight again, and went back to the window and shined it outside. The figure wasn't there. Nothing was there. I kept the light on. I had him this time. But before the lightning flashed, the batteries died and the light went out. And then the figure appeared in a lightning flash. It was right at the steps to the patio. I ran to my room again in utter fear, and I scurried under my blankets like a child, a scared child. My lamp turned on, and I filled the room with light as the storm rolled through. I ended up falling asleep with all the lights on. Since then, I hadn't looked outside to watch the lightning flash. I was too afraid of the monster outside in our backyard. Though I was still halfway believing that I was seeing things. The lightning was playing tricks on me. It had to have been. I had read into the news that the next storm this rainy season was coming soon, within about 3 days. I needed to find out once and for all if that thing was real or not. Trees were blown back by wind as the storm was coming through. Mama and Dad and my younger sister had all headed to their rooms for bed that night, leaving me downstairs with my pile of homework. The first rumble of thunder startled me. I hadn't even noticed the lightning. I'd finished my papers and cleaned everything up and got my stuff ready for my next day's classes. And then the lightning struck again. I wasn't looking outside, but something inside me knew that it was there, waiting for me to go to the window and look. I took a deep breath and headed for the window. Again, the only light that was on was the dining room light. I cautiously approached the window, not sitting down in my chair this time, but I looked outside. I counted the seconds from the last rumble of thunder to the next flash of lightning. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. I stammered as the lightning flashed and revealed that dark figure. Same as always, I didn't bother with a flashlight. I knew it was there, and I wanted to see how far up it would creep up with every flash of lightning. Another flash came closer, and then another. By this time, he was on the patio. I took a step back, almost stumbled over my chair, far enough to where I got a full view of our glass back door. We'll say about 10 feet or so. Another flash, and I could not believe what I saw. He was in my house, standing at the closed back door. Locked, might I add. He just stood there. I had no voice to scream with. I had to turn and run away this time. I ran into our bathroom upstairs. I turned on all the lights and I locked the door. I sat there and waited. Not sure what I was waiting for, but I waited. Nothing happened. Eventually, I fell asleep in our bathtub. The night was quiet and there was no figure coming after me, so I slept soundly. The next morning I woke up. I checked my cell phone in my pocket and it read that it was 8 a.m. I got up and stretched, cringing at the pathetic sleeping spot that gave me a crick in my neck and minor backaches. I rinsed off my face and unlocked the door. It was a Saturday, so the family should have been downstairs making breakfast. I stretched one more time, then headed out of the bathroom. But something didn't feel right. I did not hear the sizzling of the frying pan downstairs, the smell of bacon or coffee as it was being brewed. In fact, I'd smelt nothing. I looked at my parents' bedroom door, and then my sister's. Both were shut. Curious, I went to my sister's door and knocked to see if she was up. There was no answer. I knocked again. Nothing. This time, I opened the door so I can say, "Good morning!" But the only word I managed out of my mouth was just "good." For what I saw made all of my insides cease to function. It was my sister, in bed, uncovered, and stained with blood. Her chest had been cut open to display her heart, which was resting in her folded hands on her stomach. Her throat was slit and her eyes wide open like she was in shock. I covered my mouth in a gasp and stepped back, slamming the door and turning to run to my parents' room. I swung the door open only to find the same gruesome scene that I had just witnessed in my sister's room. The only difference was that both my mother and my father were holding hands, and their hearts rested beside one another with their hands conjoined, their eyes closed, Their heads were tilted towards each other with slit throats. The bed sheets completely drenched in their blood. I couldn't stomach anymore at this horrid, gruesome sight. I vomited and shut the door. I stumbled down the stairs for the phone and called the police. The downstairs looked normal. I looked at the locked glass back door and the wet patio from last night's storm. The storm. It came into my house. It killed my family, my parents, my little sister. It killed them. I sank to my knees in tears and sobbing and stayed there until the police arrived. They directed me to the couch for questioning, and the EMTs evicted the bodies from the house. I told the police about the monster and how he appeared during storms. They looked at me like I was crazy. But they did write everything down. Once the questions were over and they packed up and left, I heard an officer saying they suspected a break-in and a murder. They didn't believe me. Once they were gone, I was alone. I wiped my face with my shirt and took deep breaths. Then I realized that our indoor plants sitting in the kitchen windowsill and the bigger ones by the back door, they were dry. I looked out the window and saw that another wave of rain was coming. I took our potted plants outside and let them get a good dose of rain. I then sat down at my normal spot out the window and watched when the rain started to fall and fill the plants with water to the brim before it overflowed. A moment later, there was a knock at the front door. I was too mesmerized at the sound of the outside rain. My reality engulfed in the sound, actually. Suddenly, I was touched on the shoulder. It made me jump. It was a lady, a nurse, with her tray of little cups and pills. "And how are we today, madame?" she asked me. She handed me my cup. I began to rant and talk about the dark figure that had took my family and slaughtered them. She just shook her head and turned to walk away after I took my pills. "If that's how you cope with the blood on your hands," she said, and left.